my name is Calavik McNamara, and I'm a graduate student at North Carolina State University. And this is my culminating project entitled Buen Camino, a proposed Spanish 1 curriculum to foster communicative and intercultural proficiency. So I'm a teacher. I taught high school Spanish for 4 years before coming back for my master's. So this is a topic that I felt was needed in my field, and I hope to use it in the future in my classroom next year. And I'd like to thank Sigma Delta Pi for its generous research grant, which completely funded this endeavor. All right, so the agenda for the talk, I would like to talk about the purpose of the project, give a brief introduction to what the Camino is, give survey results from the data that I collected to drive the project, explain the product that I came up with, and then discuss future goals for the project. Unfortunately, there's no Q&A since this is a recording, but if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to clarify anything. So first of all, there are challenges to integrating culture. Oftentimes, language and culture are treated in the classroom as if they're separate entities. So rather than presenting vocab lists and grammar drills, I'd like to present the material in the context in which it was intended for. So rather than just giving a list of words, we can present photos or show videos or music and present the topics within a cultural framework. So traditional approaches to teaching culture, I know this is from 1985, but this is a talk that's often cited even in modern pedagogical books that we read as we're becoming teachers. So there's what Galloway calls the Frankenstein approach, which would be, teaching about bullfights in Spain and decorating sugar skulls from Mexico. And there's nothing wrong, of course, with presenting things from different cultures within the target culture. But what the problem is if we treat it as if it's the complete representation of what the culture is. So rather than that, maybe going deep into one, target culture, or, really clarifying that this is true in this region, but not everywhere in the Spanish-speaking world. Then we have the 4F approach, which is, folk dance, festival, food, and fairs. So things that are important aspects of culture, but not the end-all be-all. There is, deeper avenues of culture we can talk about, such as times and the concept of time, meal times, and being late to an event versus early, and what all of those things mean in the target culture. There's the tour guide approach, which would be showing landmarks and cities and sculptures, things that are you might see along a tour guide, but not talking about deeper perspectives. And then the by the way approach, which would be, oftentimes you'll see in a textbook, there's the content, and then there's a margin on the side with, oh, by the way, in this culture, this is something that just a random aspect of culture that has nothing to do with the content. So getting away from that and presenting the language within a cultural context is what I'm trying to drive home with this project. So ACTFL created World Readiness Standards for Learning Languages, which really, it's called the 5 C's. So we have communication, cultures, connections, comparisons, and communities. So these are all aspects that should go into teaching language. It's not just about communication. It should also, teach students to be culturally respectful and aware. It should connect students to the community around them, or compare, our culture with the target culture and make those connections with other disciplines. So we have proficiency benchmarks and can-do statements. So the proficiency benchmark is a very broad goal for the course. So we have, for example, in my own and other cultures, I can identify products and practices to help me understand perspectives. So already we're getting at a deeper view of culture. And then the performance indicators break it down even further. So we have products and practices, language and behavior. For example, in my own and other cultures, I can identify some typical products related to familiar everyday life. And then you can break it down even farther into lesson goals. For example, in my own and other cultures, I can identify social practices such as greetings, introductions, leave taking, and thanking people. Or I can greet and take leave from someone using polite rehearsed behaviors. So this would give students not only a communicative goal, I can say goodbye, but also I can use appropriate cultural practices to say goodbye. So the purposes of my project are first to collect data from teachers. So I sent out a survey, which I will talk about in a moment, that collected data on perceptions of importance of incorporating culture, how frequently culture is incorporated, how comfortable teachers feel with integrating culture, and what resources they already use and would like to use. Also to compile cultural and contextualized resources from the Camino. So given what they've asked for and given my experience on the Camino last summer, to create a storehouse of those materials that they can use. Then to create a curricular framework with unit themes and objectives thematically based around the Camino. And then to fully develop the first unit of instruction so it's ready to go. Then to organize photos, videos, and activity resources that teachers can use. And then finally to share those resources with teachers in the county. All right, so that's an overview of the purpose. And I'm going to stamp this just like we would on the Camino. I'll explain that in a minute. So now we're going to talk about the Camino. I didn't want to just gloss over that without kind of explaining the experience briefly. So the Camino de Santiago is a pilgrimage across Spain. So there are multiple Caminos. I did the French Way, which is about 500 miles. It's the one in green. And it took me 35 days. And this is the most popular route. So that's the one that I decided to do. It was wonderful. It goes from France all the way to Santiago de Compostela. So what is the Camino de Santiago? Historically, it's a pilgrimage to the cathedral where the bones of St. James are reported to be. So here in this image, that's where the bones are said to be. And it dates back to the 800s. So it's a medieval pilgrimage, and it's really gaining in popularity. All right, so why do people walk the Camino? For many reasons: religious, exercise, challenge, adventure, to heal from something before starting a new chapter. So many reasons. Why did I choose this context for a curriculum? Really, any context from a target culture could have been used for a curriculum. But I chose the Camino because I already have materials from Central America and the Caribbean that I use and have shared in class with other instructors as well. And I wanted to go to Spain, and I wanted to have more information from another country to share with my students and with my colleagues. Also because the adventurous context of the Camino would be engaging to students. I'd hope that they would, want to learn the language to maybe have this experience someday. It also mirrors the journey of learning a language, and that sometimes it's hard, it's exciting, and then also it has checkpoints to mark progress. So each day on the Camino we received a stamp in our passport that could definitely be used in the classroom to mark meeting objectives. So I thought it would be a neat context, something different for students. And here are just some pictures from my journey. So this is from day one. We wear a shell on our backpacks to signify that we were pilgrims. We stay in albergues, in the evenings, oftentimes in bunk beds. We hand wash and hang dry our clothing. In the evenings, we eat oftentimes what's called el menú del peregrino. So it has a first, second, and third course meal, lots of food. And here we have some pictures of the scenery. It was gorgeous. And then here's the cathedral, which is behind me, so you can't really see it. And that's the picture on the right is when I arrived in Santiago at the Pilgrim's office to receive my certificate. All right, so that's just a brief overview. I could talk for days on El Camino, but just to give you an idea. So survey results, I gave a survey to every department chair in Wake County Public School System, and I asked them to give it to the teachers in their department that taught Spanish. So I ended up with 40 surveys, 40 participants that took the survey. 75% taught high school, 25% taught middle school, and then large numbers of them, 77.5 taught Spanish 1 and 92.5 had taught Spanish 1 within the past 5 years. So that really motivated my desire to plan a Spanish 1 curriculum because that's what's most often taught. So first of all, some of the questions that I asked was how important culture is to incorporate regularly in lessons. So we have absolutely essential, very important, somewhat important, nobody put that it was not important. And then I asked how many times they incorporated it weekly. So here we'll see the numbers. So 75% of those reporting it was absolutely essential did so more than half of the week. So that's expected. 100% of those reporting it to be somewhat important did so less than half the week. So that we could expect too. But 31% of those saying it was very important did so more than half the week. So that's a little bit odd. If they think that teaching culture is important, why is it only 31% that are doing it more than half of the week? So that was insightful. Then in this question, I asked, some teachers find it challenging to incorporate culture into their lessons. How comfortable are you with incorporating culture into your lesson plans? So no one said they were not comfortable. The majority said somewhat comfortable. Sometimes I do this well, but could use some support. And then 40% said comfortable. So then I did the same thing. I took that question with number of times culture was incorporated weekly. And what we see here is that there is a correlation with how comfortable one feels with how often it's incorporated. So 71.4 that said they felt very comfortable did so half the week, more than half the week. 62.5% that said they were comfortable did so more than half the week. And then those saying somewhat comfortable, 35.5% did so more than half the week. So we see a clear correlation with how comfortable they feel and how often they implement it in the classroom. So I asked them how or what ways that they currently use to present culture, or what authentic resources they use. So most of the time, everyone said they use music, followed by videos was 93%, pictures 80%, audio segments 80%. So the electronic resources are most often used. Food, text, and let's see, personal experiences, realia, those were less common. So that also informed me that it's good to have a database online that teachers can access. They're more likely to use those. And then of resources requested, they asked for local connections, anything, realia, authentic text, videos, cultural knowledge beyond what is taught, up-to-date materials, and professional development. And those are all things that my project provides. So we did survey results, and now the explanation of the product. So I created a Google folder. So I want to go over some of the things that are in that folder. So the first thing is a Buen Camino curricular framework. So this is an important document. It gives an overview on the curriculum and the goals, the proficiency guidelines, and then what the objectives are for the course. And then down here I gave proposed performance objectives for each unit as well as a theme. So unit 1, Vamos al Camino, and I gave the objectives for that unit. Proposed vocabulary structures, intercultural opportunities, and video resources. Unit 2, I have Buen Camino, and they're introducing themselves to other pilgrims, talking about their interests, talking about their families, their likes and dislikes. And then I have proposed intercultural opportunities, resources from what I compile that they can use. Unit 3, I have Un Día Típico, so during that unit we'll do times of day, activities, avoiding reflexive verbs, but what one does on a typical day, what time those things are done. And again, we have resources that they can use there. Unit 4, we have Que Aproveches, so we'll talk about food and meal times. We'll talk about El Menú del Peregrino, what's often eaten or offered on the menus each day. And then talking about what staples are from different regions of Spain. So you'll see a lot of olive groves, and you'll see a lot of jamón serrano, and talking about where those products are grown and raised. That would be a great cultural opportunity to talk about food. And then Unit 5, we have Donde me quedo, los albergues por el camino. So talking about lodging options along the Camino. And then I have rooms of the house, and then items that are in each room. They can read and interpret reviews for a particular albergue or hostel, write a review. And then we have Unit 6, Exploremos, which would be places in the community. They can create a map. They can talk about what places they would visit in different cities along the Camino. And that's it. So we have 6 units, which is typical of a Spanish 1 course. So I am going to, we're about 14 minutes in, I'm going to create a second video to show you the rest of the resources.